right, we're just about to go live. It's almost going. Somehow it's stalled. Got it.
Yep.
All right. I think we're almost live. There we go.
Yep.
We are live
All right.
now. Cool. Hello, world. Whoever is watching this right now or watches it in the future. I am here with my mentor in human design and Gene Keys, my mentor, teacher, friend, and soon to be co-teacher, co-creator, Fabrice Boulanger. Did I say your last name right? We've been speaking a while.
Boulanger, almost just.
Yeah.
Yes.
Australianized. I've got the French last name as well, Boulanger, you know. Like,
that's true.
Yeah. Rarely ever gets said right except for by French people. Welcome. It's I mean, we've been talking a lot, but it's nice to have you here and presenting and introducing you to my community, the people who have been following along. And as I've been diving deeper into this whole human design thing and starting to reference it more and more, actually, because I've been playing with the experiment a lot in my life. And we thought we'd go live today. We're gonna go live. We're gonna do a series of videos over the next weeks and kind of like touch point on a lot of different elements of human design, and in particular, evolutionary human design, which is what Fabrice and I have been working on developing together, a curriculum that includes human design, authentic relating, gene keys, and integral theory, and kind of weaving these things together as a real developmental technology for both understanding ourselves and growing in a whole variety of ways, organizationally, relationally, individually. So we're going to dive in today and just kind of like talk about how, like, why we would even choose human design. And the reason why we would choose it or work with it is because of the impact it's had on our own lives. That's the reason why I'd want to stay with anything, is because it has created some positive benefit to my life. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So would you like to kind of introduce yourself a little bit and your background in this work, and then we'll dive deeper.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I first heard about human design when I was 19. I think I was traveling through Australia. Well, actually, it's in your area. It was a festival, and I think near Mullum, and I remember people talking about it, and it felt a bit like far out, and I don't know, I was not yet into that scene, and there were just so many different things at the festival. I was just a bit confused, and anyways, I still looked at it. It was interesting, but I didn't really get it at the time. And then about a year later, I started to go deep into hatha and kundalini yoga, tantra, meditation, and all of that. And I became a teacher and was in that world for about 5 years, very intensively. And towards the end of that time, human design came back to me, and it came at the perfect time because I was starting to meet the clear limitations of this yoga that I was doing and teaching. On one hand, I understood that those were amazing technologies, but I had two buts. First of all, those were technologies designed for people about over 1,000 years ago, and there was some upgrading to do when it comes to who we really are today. And that's one thing that human design and Gene Keys offer. It's kind of like the latest stuff we can find. And the other big one, which in my eyes is even more important, yoga as a system was designed the same pretty much for everyone. And some will debate that, but that's pretty much it. Like, it was same practices for everyone. Everyone comes to the same class, and this fits for everyone. And if it doesn't work for you, then you either don't have enough aspiration, or disciplined enough, or this or that. And
somehow, basically,
yeah. And whereas the major difference with human design and the Gene Keys is that it starts with your own personal profile. Yeah, and I was already starting to use astrology a lot during those years with yoga, but human design started to weave all of it together, like this notion of chakras or energetical centers. Well, human design talks about that. It talks about 9 instead of 7, but it talks about that. It links to astrology because it starts with the birth date, and it's giving you your own unique profile. And if we're still talking in terms of the spiritual realm, it's your own path to awakening, and you have it with the gene keys as well, 64 gene keys and 64 different paths to awakening, not just one, 64, that's a lot. And even more if we go into the lines and so on. So
The
that
unique
for me was,
combination of all of them.
yes,
Behold.
exactly. And so that for me, I think by far is the biggest thing, because that is the central piece, onto which like everything else is turning, because that's the first major gift. It's like, hey, this is you, and it's amazing to be you, and that's how you can use your profile in the best possible way for everything. I was here, starting with the spiritual view on things, but we can talk about relationships, we can talk about business and money, we can talk about, I mean, everything pretty much. And I'm sure that you have a lot of examples on your side as well.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that very much I love about these systems, is that it seems at first glance, and I get this kind of resistance sometimes of like, you're going to get put in a box. You're going to now be typed. You're going to be given this label. You're a projector or a generator or whatever, and that's it. You're now in a box and you've been limited. But I have actually found the extreme opposite has occurred through this, in that the deeper we go into a profile, we recognize that everyone is so absolutely and perfectly unique. And
Yeah.
it's phenomenal, the level of nuance that we can go to, the level of depth, and understanding that this is actually a unique blueprint. Just like, I've got my unique thumbprint. We all have a thumb, we all use our thumb, but my one is unique to me and only me. And it's kind of the same thing. And that's actually liberating rather than confining. And that's been one of my primary kind of personal benefits, and something that I've really enjoyed with anyone that I've ever given a reading to or worked with. That kind of like, oh, like I'm like, most of the time the readings are just validating. It's like, yeah, I kind of know that about myself, but it's like permission to be that. It's like, oh, I don't have to, there's nothing broken or wrong with me for being this way. This is actually how I am.
Yeah, I feel that's by far the biggest thing I give people when giving a reading. It's not about telling you what to do. Like, through this profile, I'm giving you permission to be yourself. And it's like, and sometimes people start crying, or they start laughing, or they're like, oh, there's, like you were saying, there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah.
And there's always a side of shadows to all of it, but there's no profile that's better or worse. It's just every single profile, whether we look at type or authority, we're looking at the lines, we're looking at the centers, there's always going to be difficulties. There's always going to be a shadow, of course. But there's always a way out of it as well. And there's a way to use those specific gifts. And, at first you were saying like people might be afraid to be put into a box, but when they really start going down that road, and when they really start the experiment, and first of all, when they start understanding the nuances of their profile, because a major mistake that I see is people just trying to apply, I don't know, one advice they heard about being a projector, like just wait for the invitation, and then they think it means just sitting at home doing nothing, and the world is supposed to come to you, and then they get super frustrated, and Ra is an asshole because he told them to wait at home, and now they're even more bitter than before. When they really start going into the nuances of things and really going into that experiment, then it's like, oh, this feels easy. This is actually really, really natural. And that's how it should feel. When you hear certain things about your profile, if it doesn't sound like, yes, that would feel amazing. Even when we go into business with the gene keys and the pearl sequence, and we talk about your brand, what is your own unique brand? It's like, that should feel easy. That should be like, I can do that. I want to do that.
Yeah.
Instead of a business coaching program, which is giving you the same fucking strategy for 20 different people.
That's one of the most remarkable things here, is that And the more that I dive into it as well, is I realize I can't give blanket advice to people. There are certain things, there are certain rules that we can, like things like attachment theory do have some kind of, there is some kind of mechanism, but there's this unique approach. Like, I'm like, I need to see people's design to understand, because there's going to be a unique way. Just like you said, as a projector, it like, oh, to be invited actually is going to feel good or easy. And it's like, for me, like, I'm a manifestor type. Waiting to feel invited would just feels weird. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like I'd get annoyed if I had to happen. Like, I need to go and do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do.
Yeah.
So I have a question. So what you started to learn human design, and what started changing for you as you started learning? Like, what was kind of the first thing that landed, and then how did that like start rippling into your life?
It took some time, first of all, to be honest. It really took some time because I had to adapt to a new system, and it takes a while. Well, at least because I was kind of doing, my own self-study here and there, listening to Ra talk on some videos, and I was going to some meetings with others, but we're all like trying to figure this thing out. And the first thing that landed obviously was being a projector, and what I shared about that. But I think the first major breakthrough for me, the first thing that I started to apply and made a really big difference was my inner authority. So for me, being an emotional authority and understanding that I need to take my time to make decisions, that was like, it sounds so simple, but actually doing it and realizing that I've had, over a decade of making shit decisions because I was rushing into them. I would commit to things when it was not the right time to commit to them, and I would regret a lot of my decisions. I would be impulsive, whether it's in relationships or even with my money and spending and like a lot of different things. And just taking my time, just applying that. It doesn't matter whether I'm going into a relationship or I'm have an important business decision to make, or I have something to buy, or I'm looking for a new house, or there's a problem showing up, and I'm like, just take a step back and wait. Just wait, and to watch the magic unfold by just waiting. Whereas, that same advice for a spleen person, exactly, is not, it's not smart at all. It's not for you.
I mean, the interesting thing is that's really been the first big impact. And it was like the opposite for me. The first big impact I had was learning as an undefined solar plexus, emotional center, completely undefined, that actually I didn't have to feel my way through things. I didn't have to wait to see how I felt about things. I could respond entirely differently. And in fact, emotions and feelings was something to just kind of watch, but not pay a huge amount of attention to. And when that landed, it was like my entire life felt like I was doing it wrong. All of a sudden, it was like I woke up out of this, like, I've been living as if my emotions were the most important thing that I needed to pay attention to, and they actually aren't. They're actually something to be studied and investigated and be curious about, but not to inform my life. And it was like a radical shift. All of a sudden, like chronic depression, like years, like 20 plus years of chronic depression states just melted away. I was like, I don't have to do that anymore. I'm actually designed to be way more stable emotionally. And that was massive for me, like mind-blowingly massive.
Yeah. So those are the kind of things, like and for me, really the central pieces around strategy and authority. And of course, when you go deeper into the centers and so on, but this authority thing really being like, okay, how am I supposed to make decisions? And that whole concept can be a bit confusing with people. Like, what do you mean? And then you go into the theme of, you're not supposed to be using your mind. You have to use your body in a certain way, and so on and so on. And that also, the biggest thing take away from human design is that you cannot use your mind for decision making. That's another massive piece that takes a while also to
one of the
implement.
problems we're facing on the planet right now is the amount of people trying to use their mind to make choices rather than listen to their body, listen to their inner authority. My spleen now says no to certain things, and I just go, okay, that's fine. Don't need to do anything more than that.
And that's a whole lifetime of conditioning there that we have, and more, like it's stuff that we're taking on from, you know, our whole family tree and our ancestors and so on, because we come from, you know, generations of only using their mind and not listening to the body at all. And so that's probably the biggest deconditioning to go through is, and I can't say that I'm done with it, you know, myself. I think it's a whole life's work to do that. But it's the most important because, you know, life is really just a series of left, right, yes, no, black or white. And that's how we move through life. And, you know, someone could go into the more spiritual and philosophical view of there are no mistakes, it's all perfect, and so on and so on. Yeah, in the big picture, sure. But meanwhile, things could be a lot smoother. You know, you don't have to struggle so much through everything. You know, you don't have to feel so frustrated and angry and bitter. And that's really the main thing. It's like it starts to be like just more smooth. Yeah. And it just feels good.
I love to think of the way that I like to describe human design and the gene keys. I think of human design as like, it's about efficiency. You know, if I learn really about my human design, I become a more efficient human. And so things become smoother, there's less friction, and I'm able to just navigate my life and do what I need to do without kind of all of these things I'm grinding and bumping against. And then when I learn gene keys, like I think of gene keys as like the blueprint of our potential enlightenment, you know, like that's my own unique enlightenment. And like enlightenment isn't just one flavor. There's like myriads of flavors, you know. And if you go look at some of the esoteric arts, I've been reflecting on this, like Buddhism, there's many Buddhas in Tibetan Buddhism. There's like hundreds of different Buddhas, right? And they represent different aspects of enlightenment. It's like, oh, it's the same thing for us. If we were to actually continue to spiritually grow, and it's a gradient, not an on-off, there's a gradient of growth and development towards enlightenment. The gene keys offers a potential unique blueprint of that. That's like, my version of that is different than yours. And it's like, oh, those two things blend together in this very interesting way.
And there's an argument to that I often hear, which is people being like, but I just want to do what I want to do. You know, why do I have to follow this profile? And it's like, if you like friction and struggle, sure, go ahead. Or like another argument would be, do I need this profile? Wouldn't I naturally be drawn to the path that is most right for me? The answer is yes, if you are a self-empowered and not conditioned being.
And untraumatized, you know.
And exactly, like there's so many pieces in there that would have to be cleaned up for you to be able to really listen. And I know some people, like it's true, because they say, you know, once you start human design, you need 7 years of deconditioning, and until then, you know, like yes and no, because depending on how much work you've done before on yourself and using other modalities, and you know, we use some of them in the program as well, then it's not going to take as long. There's already a part of you that has been deconditioned, maybe a big part of you. And I do believe that someone through, you know, other modalities, never even touching human design, might end up, you know, naturally. I've talked to people, you know, but usually those people are not in their 20s, you know, they're usually older and they had to learn the hard way, and they're, you know, in their 30s, 40s, 50s or more. And naturally they learn to take their time for decision making, you know, or naturally they've learned to, you know, listen to their gut feelings, or it doesn't matter, you know, but that for them is just falling into place. But we're talking about people who've, you know, had several decades of work on themselves, and then it's like, okay, it's just a shortcut, it's faster, you have the whole map in front of you. You know, on one hand you have your human design profile, which is your user manual. You know, imagine when you were, if at the time of your birth, the user manual to Damien is given to your parents, and they know how you're supposed to function, because that's another big piece, parenting. And maybe we could have a whole live about parenting and human design, because kids get fucked up because parents don't know their profiles and how to deal with them. And then we have your gene keys profile, which is your life map. Yeah, the map to your awakening, the map to your enlightenment, as you're putting it. Those two things together, you just save so much time, so much struggle.
Mm.
And it's fun. I love it. I remember like starting to get into it, and as I was really understanding all of it, like it's just, for me, it was really, really fascinating, and it still is.
Mm. I mean, that's something that happened to me when I first encountered it. I was like, okay, I have a, and it's so funny, like I can't help but think in the map now, because it's like I can see my tendencies and how they play out. It's like a language. I've learned it as a language, right? And I'm like, okay, my profile is actually tends towards wanting to deeply investigate something. It's like I found it out that what human design is, and all of a sudden I started collecting maps. Everyone I met, I would ask for their map and I'd input it. And I've got an app with hundreds of people's profiles. And I just started collecting. I didn't even know about the system yet. I knew hardly anything, but I knew I'm going to want to know more about this at some point. So I'm collecting data now. And I just started looking at profiles and feeling people and like, how do these two relate? And then as I started learning with you and I started to actually really understand the map and the language itself, it's like, oh, it made sense. I get to go back to that Rolodex of people and actually start to investigate. Oh, okay, I can see this. I can see this in this person and this in that person. And it's not like I'm looking at people like I'm looking at them as if I have them figured out, but it's like, oh, this is an innate tendency towards the way that you are. And it becomes deeply accepting, right? I remember one of my housemates that I lived with, when I started to understand the map, I understood that as an emotional authority, as someone with an emotional solar plexus, she was going through an emotional wave on the regular. And that there would be some mornings where she'd be in a certain low in her emotional wave and she would be unapproachable. And I used to take that personally. And I'd be like, well, why does she not, like me or anything? And I could feel it as well as an undefined emotional solar plexus. I get hit by other people's emotions until I've learned to just like, that's someone else's stuff. I don't have to listen to it, and that's bounded stuff that we'll get into in the second course of it. But I started to just go, okay, that's her thing. And I can just accept it. And that's something that's really beautiful. It's like an acceptance of like, this is how you are. You're designed this way. And there's no point in me trying to think or struggle or want you to be different than you are. I actually get to really deeply accept you. And that's like the root of compassion, to actually go, this is how you are. And I'm just going to accept it as you are. There's no point fighting about it. But there's one more point I wanted to go into, and then I want to pass it back to you. It's like you've mentioned it a couple of times, this deconditioning. And I just want to highlight deconditioning is, as I understand it, it's a process by when you learn your profile, you kind of start to understand who you are, and you go through this process of naturally, it's quite a natural process, letting go of everything you're not. I'm a manifestor, which means I'm not a generator. I'm not here designed to do consistent outputs of work on the daily. That's not what I'm here to do. And when I can really deeply understand that, I let go of it. And it's like we have the uncarved block, right? It's just a block of wood. And the deconditioning process is recognizing that there's some magnificent shape underneath, but we need to carve away everything that doesn't fit to reveal that. And that's that process. And that process is a process of investigation and understanding your profile. So I want to ask you, as you started doing this process, as you started investigating your own profile and going through a deconditioning, what did you notice start happening in your life?
I mean, the two areas that I can think of, and usually the two areas where people are the most interested in, it's relationships and business and money. This year is by far the year where I've followed my profile the most in my business, and it's the year where I've made the most in my life. And that's something that I keep on reinforcing in business readings, like less is more, less is more, less is more. And when I say less, I don't mean less work. I just mean like less of all the extra stuff, less of all the fluff and the all the things that you've been told you're supposed to do to have a successful business. And
the cookie cutter marketing and sales and launch funnel programs.
And there's another word for that: compromise. No more compromising. And that's really what it is when you follow your profile. You no longer have to compromise. And that's valid for business. And it's also valid for relationships. Like, if I had to take one area of my life where it's had the biggest transformation, and where this field of compassion that you were talking about has been in the most, it's relationships, both friendships, understanding my family, and then with my primary partner. Me being a 4/6 projector and her being a 1/3 generator. What a difference. And at the same time, how harmonious it can be once we learn how to work with it. But first of all, for me to learn it and to start getting an understanding of both of us, but also for her to then also learn the same language, and then to be like, okay, like this is who you are, this is who I am, and this is why we're so different. But this is also the amazing things that we each have, and how we can put them together and work together, and how actually it's really, really amazing. But now it's like compassion is the foundation of the relationship, because we can talk about unconditional love and the capacity of the heart to just love and love and love and accept. But there is no, like, that's not compassion. Compassion is a combination of the heart's capacity to love with the mind's ability to understand. And when it's the heart mind, and when those two come together, we have compassion. And you can work all your life on opening your heart, but if you don't actually understand deep down why is the person the way they are, you cannot really get to this full compassion. And so getting to that point when you really deeply understand, okay, this is why, and it just, of course, there's a shadow to that, which either you can give yourself or the other excuses for this, like it can turn into excuses rather than just, this is the way it is. Or it can also be used as a way to manipulate others, as a way to put other people down, as a way to kind of like only highlight their shadows and to make them feel guilty. But where I see it the most, it just helps to work together. And there's a humoristic side of it too. We can laugh about ourselves a lot more. And that's something that I see, like there's a certain lightness to it if you do it right. A couple, for example, like I will give a relationship reading, and that specific couple, they're in a really challenging time or in their lives, and they don't know what to do anymore. And usual therapy might put them a bit more on the defensive side of things, and maybe denial and so on, and taking it very personally. But then when I look at, oh, you're 6'2", and your second line here, yeah, that's the line of projection, and so you most likely, have this and this and that. And they're like, wow, it's written right there on paper. Like, I can't deny it. I can't, and it's like, hey, it's not like your fault. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just, this is your profile, and this is the shadow of it. And this is also the gift, and this is how you can work with it. And then you, the other partner, this is how you can also help them. This is how you can deal with them, and so it's just lighter, and I think it makes the relational work a lot more fun as well. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to bookmark that, and we can definitely talk about that, and we're going to go into that in the course as well, like really from a therapeutic lens and from a mental health lens. Actually, standard therapeutic advice starts to fall down when we recognize that there are unique and innate differences that exist. I have a hypothesis that a lot of ADHD diagnosis is actually manifesting generators, and they're designed to be all over the place. That's part of their design. And now we're saying there's something wrong with it. So understanding we're not a one size fits all, that doesn't exist for us. But I also want to agree with the relational component is when it gets really exciting and really fun. And I've been finding the same benefit. Like, as understanding myself has been really like a really interesting thing, and coming to a sense of self-love and self-empowerment. And especially the more I understand myself and diving deeper with the gene keys is really like, I can feel like my core, like my inside, the solidity in the center of my being getting stronger and thicker. It's like the more I go, this is who I am, and I'm not going to apologize for it, and I'm not going to try and be anyone else. That's quite incredible. But then when we add the relational dynamic onto it, it gets super fun, especially if you both have that same language. It's an incredible way to understand what's happening between you. I use that in in my relationship, we explore our composite charts together. We understand how we're designed, where's the flow of energy happening between us. Then we start adding the gene keys overlaid, and we can actually start to diagnose where are the shadows appearing in conflict. And that immediately takes us to a transpersonal perspective. And now we're in transpersonal conflict resolution, which is like total game changer. There's no personal stuff happening anymore. We're not sitting in our trigger, especially if we know how to regulate our nervous system and all this other foundational stuff. We can go to a totally different game, relational game here. We can bring it into our work perspectives. I use it in my work. The people I work with, I look at our composites and I understand how they fit, particularly as I've been exploring the Pearl sequence. How do we create an organization together based on our unique signatures? And it fits. Especially as a manifester, people come to me. You know, when I really sit in my manifester, this is what I'm doing, people come to me and go, hey, I want to help. I'm like, sweet, show me your profile. Tell me your profile. Look at your profile. I'm like, oh, the very thing that you're approaching me that says you want to do is actually perfect. And this is why and how it fits. It's remarkable.
Yeah, so, it's been fun watching you build the whole, business model around that as well.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I'm a type that, like, when I take on an experiment, I'm going to take it on fully, and I'm going to learn the language. I often think about, I spent a long time in Thailand, and I learned to speak the Thai language simply by immersion. I didn't go to any class. I didn't have a dictionary. I didn't take notes or anything. I simply immersed myself in the language, and I spoke to everyone all the time, and I learned the language. And I speak, like, I can get on the phone. Well, I probably not anymore, my language be rusty, but I used to be able to get on the phone and people wouldn't know that I wasn't Thai. My accent got really sharp, and I could probably get away with 2 or 3 minutes before I messed up some grammar, and they're like, hang on a second, you're not Thai? And I'm like, nope. Yeah. So I got really, really good in the language, and it feels the same way for human design. I've just gone, right, I'm all in, I'm learning this language. I want to figure it out and make sense of it.
There's your first line.
It's my first line, you know, and I'm starting to love it. Like, I used to, it's interesting. My first line in the unconscious. So I'm a 4-1 for those of you who know this. So my first line is, we call it the unconscious, but I'm starting to think of it's really the non-conscious. It's like the body or the design. It's not the unconscious. It's the way Jung speaks about it. It's a different form of non-conscious or non-personality base. I'm having to learn to love it. And I used to not love the fact that there's this part of me that pulls me towards aloneness and pulls me deep into my own mind and my aloneness, where this front part, this 4, wants me to be out and be connected and be networked. And I'm always like, when I get pulled into that aloneness, my 4 would feel pain, as if I'm being rejected or ostracized. So I'm actually my current edge, and I want to ask you this question as we start to wrap up, so I'll lead with it. My current edge seems to be actually learning to love this line 1 part of me, learning to love the investigator, learning to love the part of me that wants to really understand things. And then I'm starting to understand that there is that part of me. And to me, the second line is really, I'm starting to learn, is that's how I experience myself. And I've spoken about it. That's kind of really my truer nature underneath the way the world's going to see me. And so there's this part of me that wants to deeply investigate, deeply understand, deeply explore. But then I have this line 4 personality, which is in Gene Keys, the server. So it's like I'm investigating in service of contributing. So I want to give that out. So I've got this beautiful, as I learn to love this, I've got this tendency to want to investigate. And I can, the way my design is, I can investigate things, understand them quite deeply in a way that I can articulate. And then I have this burning desire to want to share it and offer it to the world as, here, this might help you. This might be of benefit. And that, coupled with the Pearl sequence, being immersed in the Pearl sequence and starting to explore the organism of business from a Gene Keys perspective, is a very interesting edge. So I also wanted to ask you, where's your current, as our last question, just to wrap this up, where's your current learning edge? What are you exploring at the edge of your journey right now?
Well, I've gone through the Pearl sequence several times, but it's the first time that I'm doing the retreat in which you're in as well. And before that, I dedicated an entire year to the Venus sequence, which I had already done a few times before, but I never took that much time for it. And the sphere of the core in the Venus sequence, which is the very end of the Venus sequence, and then turns into the sphere of vocation in the pearl. So our greatest talent and gift that we're supposed to bring forth. That's my contemplation at the moment, because I'm a first line in there. And when we talk about the core wound, it's about repression and fears and so on. And especially being a 4/6, it's easy for me to repress all that side of things, or to kind of like ignore it. But then also in the vocation, the first line becomes the creator, the script writer. Yes, it's a very creative person. And that's also something I feel I've repressed over the years, the creative side of me. How am I? And I think you're also a first line in that sphere. So that's where I'm looking at the moment, kind of, and it feels like this thing deep inside that's been kind of like asleep, and it's a bit angry because it's been repressed for so long, and it's just coming out more and more and more. So yeah, looking in the ways in which I am actually a first line, and the ways in which I am creative, and then what wants to come through me really.
And what's the key? What's the key there? The gene key?
39. So it's liberation. Well, it's at the shadow level, it's provocation. And then it's dynamism as the gift, and liberation. And that's, when I look deep down, actually, this is where my creativity wants to go. I've had this long dream of having a center and really designing the ideal place and curriculum, and using different modalities and systems and so on, that will be like the best, most complete container for liberation, and it fits. I just have to allow it to really come out, and to not just postpone it. It's always like, yeah, but later, the big dream can come later.
If you don't mind sharing also, how does provocation fit for you there at the shadow level?
Well, it goes two ways, because on one hand is being provoked, and it's connected to aggression, and the other hand also has to do with, I like to poke people, and it's interesting because at the shadow level, it's done just for my own entertainment or to get even negative attention. But it's kind of like, with that key, you know exactly which buttons to push. And I've learned mostly to just keep them to myself. But it's meant to be used, that's where dynamism and then liberation kicks in. It's meant to be used when it's coming from the heart. Then you just know which buttons to push to free someone from their own limitations. Yeah, you just know like the thing to say, or it doesn't matter, but that, yeah, right there, this is exactly the thing you need to do or change, or this is the thing you need to hear right now. And hopefully it's gonna help you. So yeah, that's always with the gene keys. The gift and the city are already contained within the shadows. It's just a different frequency of the same thing.
Yeah, I've definitely been starting to feel that more and more, how it's the same frequency, but it just changes in the form of it somehow.
Yeah, because I see like liberation as as compassionate provocation. I'm provoking your spirit. Yeah.
Beautiful. So in summary, I want to wrap up that we've kind of been dancing around both human design and gene keys, and the way we're working with them, and the way we're constructing. And you've got two line one vocational creators here. So, curriculum design and the precision of curriculum design is very important to both of us, and that's what we've been working on, is like, how do we actually create a curriculum that's going to be as potent, profound for liberation, and over here authority, as we can, authority and valor. So But I just want to point out that like some of this language may be really confusing, and we're intermixing both human design and gene keys. And we naturally and fluidly move between these two systems because they're actually deeply interrelated with one another. There's no real separation between the two. And that to me is incredibly beautiful once we start recognizing it's almost like it almost becomes like there's two-dimensional manuscripts, but then you put them together and all of a sudden you have a three-dimensional kind of intricate object that has so many connections going in all over the place. So it's like, yeah, I just wanted to point out that there's a lot that we're going, and we're speaking almost like speaking another language. So some of it may feel confusing or misunderstanding, but that doesn't matter. We're going to go live a bunch more times and start to like focus on little areas so we can actually start to present little parts of this language and start to give some basic vocabulary lessons, and just basically share our passion and enthusiasm for these topics. So
yeah, I think, one of the next goals, we can definitely talk about the connection between the two systems, and really what ERD is, also connecting to integral theory, connecting to your work as well. So yeah, we'll spend more time on it.
Thank you so much, Fabrice. It's been great.
Thank you. I believe I'll see you tomorrow.
We shall see tomorrow. We're going to do another live tomorrow. And yeah, thanks all for watching.